Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Masei, which means the travels, and indeed the beginning of the Torah portion lists all the various places that the children of Israel are traveling through the desert until they get to the land of Canaan. We also have the borders. We have the borders of the land set forth as well. So there's a lot of geography in this Torah portion. In chapter 36, we have a discussion of, actually part 2 of the situation of the daughters of Tzlafchad. If you recall, a few weeks ago, we read in the portion of Pinchas, towards the end of that portion, that the daughters of Tzlafchad, there are 5 women whose father had passed away and who had no sons. And now in these chapters where we're dealing a great deal about apportioning the land and the inheritance of the land and dividing it up between the various tribes and then the families within those tribes, the inheritance goes to the men. And it is through the men in the family that the land is passed and kept within the tribe. And here we have a situation where this is one of the original families that have left Egypt, and these 5 women are not going to have land if something special isn't arranged, because they're part of that first generation that is inheriting the land. Everyone in that first generation, every male in that first generation inherits this piece of land, and the question is what happens to these women whose father has already died. And of course the determination is made that they will inherit, that women in their own right will inherit the land that would have initially been apportioned to their father. They will actually become heirs of that land. And as a result of this determination, this we see again a few weeks ago, as a result of this determination, a new law is made. Moses himself doesn't know how to handle this. He has to go before God and ask him, well, how do I rule in this sort of situation? And then the ruling is that if in this situation where a man dies and he has no sons, then the daughters will inherit. Now this, of course, was probably a very revolutionary law in this time, at a time when it was definitely a male-dominated society, patriarchal society. What's fascinating, though, and again, going back to chapter 27, how the first verse, how this whole situation is set forth, then approach the daughters of Tzlafchad, the son of Chefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, of the families of Menashe, the son of Joseph, and these are the names of his daughters, and it reads the names. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the princes and all the congregation by the entrance of the appointed tent. These are not shy women. These women don't go to Moses in some private corner. They don't send their cousins or their uncles to speak on their behalf. These 5 women come before the entire nation, before Moses, before the priest, before the princes, and all the congregation, and they bring their case. So these women are indeed special women. What we see in this week's chapter, as I said, was part 2, because after this determination is made, they realize that they have another problem. If they themselves are the heirs to this land, there is a risk that if we still have the law that once a woman is married, her territory becomes part of her husband's family. Now, in the case of these women, if they were to marry outside of the tribe of Menashe, then that piece of land that is sitting in the middle of the territory of Menashe is at risk to become part of the territory of another tribe. And as a result of this question, again, a question that no one had thought of earlier. This is a question that comes out of, again, it's a very, very practical question. And as a result of this question, there is not a change of the law, but an instruction to these women, this first generation of women, how they should behave. And the instruction is they can marry whoever they want, but they should marry men within their own tribe. And essentially, they'll be marrying their cousins, their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th cousins. But they have to marry within their tribe. Why? To protect the integrity of the land, to protect the integrity of the territory. And these women have no problem with this. They agree, and we learn afterwards at the end that they indeed ended up marrying their cousins, and the the land remained within the tribe. And this, of course, is how the entire book of Numbers ends, with this particular note. Now, on the one hand, you could say this is a small technicality. Why is it so important? Why do we have to bring chapter 2 to begin with on the story of the daughters of the inheritance? And why is it that this story is the story that concludes this entire book? I think, though, the message here is actually a beautiful one. Living in a patriarchal society, the very daring of these women to come and broach the question, and the revolutionary attitude of God. Of course, God himself probably always had this attitude, but I'm sure the way this attitude is perceived at that time, at a time when only men would inherit and only men would be the owners of land, for women to be able to be the full owners of land. But that law is not going to be changed to the end. In other words, the women still are going to end up with the land passing with them to their husband's family, and therefore, in order to protect the family and the inheritance, the women will marry their cousins. We see here, therefore, that there are priorities. Priorities of keeping the land within the tribe, keeping the land within the family is a very, very important priority. And while the independence and the rights of the women are clearly recognized in the story, there's a limitation on those rights. And the limitation is governed having nothing to do with whether these women are capable or incapable of inheriting land or possessing land. That issue has already been settled. This issue has these women making a certain sacrifice in order to preserve something greater than their own individual needs, in order to preserve the territory of their family and of their tribe. And I think this is the message that we can take with us today, of course. All of us, as individuals, we have needs and we have rights and we have ways that we perceive things should be. And it is very important for us to put forth those rights and stand for those rights. On the other hand, it's always important to keep a sense of perspective. Sometimes our rights need to be compromised to a certain degree in order to preserve the integrity of the whole, the integrity of society, the integrity of the people, and in this case, the integrity of the land. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.